When you think about healing from emotional trauma, do you picture Olympic-style weightlifters, loud clanking barbells, weighing hundreds of pounds, or even that dusty pair of dumbbells tucked away in your closet? Well, you should. My guest today is Khoudari, a celebrated trauma-informed personal trainer, educator, and author. Laura reveals this new approach to healing in her debut book, Lifting Heavy Things, Healing Trauma One Rep at a Time. Welcome to my show, Laura.
Hi, thank you for having me, James.
I am looking forward to this. You and I are both into weightlifting and into fitness and exercise, so I can't wait to talk to you about how trauma can really help, or excuse me, how weightlifting can really help people who suffer with trauma as well.
Great.
Now, if I read correctly, you were someone who says ditch your health and fitness classes in high school, right?
Well, the past, not even just high school, for sure. I am not, I always talk about that I'm not like your typical fitness person. I think when you think of a personal trainer, first of all, you think of somebody in their 20s.
Sure, yes.
I'm in my 40s.
Yes.
I mean, they do get older, but I didn't start until my late 30s.
Mm.
And I actually started strength training as a way to, very reluctantly, as a way to deal with back injury that I sustained at 20, and I still didn't actually start training. I did PT to minimize some of the pain, but I was always having flare-ups, and it took me 7 years, and my mother saying, "I'm tired of watching you walk around like this. Go see my trainer," for me to step foot in the gym. I like to share that because I think my mom likes that I am telling the world that my mother was right.
That's hysterical.
And so she just, she knew I would like him, this particular trainer, and she was right. And he really made space for me to feel like it was okay to be in the gym. And I think that was a big thing. I just really didn't like to be in my body. I, felt very insecure in the gym. I didn't move well because I had been avoiding moving for so long. And he really made it feel okay to be there. And
that's important.
I modeled a lot of my own work sort of just after his natural way of being. So that's how I started. And I eventually surprised myself. It took 8 years of that before I admitted I wanted to try some barbell sports. And that's when I really fell in love.
Wow.
My back pain was no longer.
Okay.
That was great. And then barbell sports, I just became really passionate about them and I love them. And so that's when things really shifted for me. And I really became like a fitness enthusiast.
That's awesome. What are barbell sports? What is that?
Okay, so the first thing I tried was Olympic weightlifting, which at the time, this was before CrossFit was really huge. So it was a little less familiar, but what I tell people is Olympic weightlifting is the sport you see in the Summer Olympics where people get the barbell overhead using 3 different lifts. Powerlifting, which is not a sport you see in the Olympics or really televised anywhere. And that tests your ability to squat, bench press, and deadlift weight.
That one always scares me. So I'm like, oh, they're going to fall backwards.
The deadlift. And then, so those are the 2. I mean, then other strength sports that I haven't tried that I'm very curious about are like strongman and that sort of thing. Like as a kid, I used to love playing like on ESPN, 4 or whatever, people pulling trucks and chopping logs. I always like that stuff.
Oh, that was actually really fun. I always like to watch that as well. That's really cool. How did you make the connection for trauma and weightlifting?
Sure. So that, again, kind of grew out of my own personal experience. Unfortunately, I experienced outside of the gym an acute trauma in 2014 and subsequently developed PTSD. And one of my, the only place I really felt safe having fallen in love with fitness and feeling good in my body in the gym was in the gym. And, there's a plus side to that, but unfortunately, I wasn't really thinking, I wasn't having guidance in this area. All I wanted to do was only be in the gym and train. And I really began to train too much as a coping skill.
Sure, makes sense.
I was trying to feel safe all the time. That was the only place I felt
I'm sure
safe.
it's very empowering too. You're lifting incredibly heavy things, you're squatting, all that. I mean, it's like, I will take on anything.
I took up karate as well. So I was doing, these 3 very aggressive sports. And
woe to the foe that you were against.
I was training 10 times a week,
Wow.
which is way too much.
Oh my goodness.
And the
Yes.
thing is fitness culture really celebrates that. And because powerlifting and Olympic weightlifting are sports, that sort of dedication to
Sure. So
something
it's
can
okay
be
then.
celebrated. I trained until I hurt my back again.
Oh my goodness. Oh gosh. Wow. Which is so interesting. It's that
And
full cycle aspect of it, you know, and the whole sense of you're there to help, you know, to the PT that you had, you fell in love with it. And then that cycle continues of just unfortunately harming yourself. Yeah.
yes, yes. And it was very bad this time. I had a severe sciatica that left my lower half of my left leg somewhat
Oh my gosh.
paralyzed.
Oh wow.
Now, I'm okay now. Good
Okay.
Lord.
Good. 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 Whew.
Too long, don't read. I'm fine.
Okay.
But that was a very long path to getting better. And all of a sudden, the one thing I had that felt so good and safe was gone.
Yeah.
And that was very scary.
Yeah.
So I slowly, first there was a lot of very slow PT, but I realized that I needed to figure out a way to get back in the gym, and it was going to have to change dramatically for it to be safe and for me not to get hurt and for me to be able to keep training in this new, incredibly aroused state I was in all the time. And as I started to just be careful and mindful and move in this really thoughtful way, I started to realize I was also cultivating tools that I was able to use in therapy.
Good.
While in the therapist's office. And that's really when it all started.
Excellent. A lot of times, well, first of all, thank you so much for sharing that. I appreciate your vulnerability and giving us your story, your backstory about everything that happened as well. Most people, if we've heard, and I've read in the intro, do yoga and do mindful meditation, et cetera, which is absolutely wonderful. For you, though, it was different. Even though I hear you say that when you were back in the gym, you wanted to be more mindful and more intentional about probably your technique and probably the motivation for that. So I think that's something for people to recognize that yoga is a wonderful practice, and many people do that. But you can also still have that spirit, mind, body connection when you are weightlifting, when you are doing something that has maybe a slightly different form of meditation, but it still can be a meditative state to be able to connect with yourself and really heal your inner wound.
Yes, one of my big messages is you can turn any movement practice into a healing practice. It doesn't have to be yoga. I think it's wonderful that so many people are finding help through trauma-informed and trauma-sensitive yoga programs. I tried it. I tried it with a couple different teachers, and it didn't go well for me.
That can be triggering at times too.
Very, very triggering, and it was way less the frequency was less often that I would be triggered in the gym, and my ability to bounce back from that trigger was much better in the gym. I felt more resilient in the gym. And some of that has to do with, stillness versus movement and probably also comfort in the environment. And the thing is that plenty of people out there don't realize that they could get the same benefits that you could get from this sort of yoga program doing something that works better for them. Maybe they feel great rock climbing or bike riding or hiking or gardening.
Yeah.
So
and
bring that all in there.
Yeah, of course. So let's transition into your book, Lifting Heavy Things, Healing Trauma One Rep at a Time. How did that come about?
The book came about just sort of as an idea. I was actually just trying to come up with some clever marketing thing. And I was like, oh, maybe an ebook. And then what was going to be a 3-page ebook was an 11-chapter outline. Oh,
wow.
Okay, that's not a free ebook. And so that was in the fall of 2018. And I have been working on it from there. And but one of the reasons I really wanted to put this out there is a big part of my mission is expanding access to body-based practices that help support trauma healing. And I can only do so much, and there are more trauma-informed trainers out there. But I did this because I couldn't find, I found one woman in Toronto, and she was great. But I live in New York City, and I was like, I need to find more people doing this, and I couldn't. So I started doing it, and now there are more people doing it and some good programs out there to start learning how to do some trauma-informed personal training. But still, we're a handful of people, and so by making a book, which is also, $15 as opposed to the personal training sessions.
Of course,
It just really will hopefully spread the word faster than I could ever do on my own.
Well, when when your publicist, C.S. Lewis Publishing, sent it to me, I actually had never heard of it before. And I was like, what is this? And so I was truly intrigued. And so obviously hearing your story and hearing how it works, I'm 100% behind it. Someone who goes to the gym all the time as well. And I feel, for me, I go to the gym every single day, not for how I look, but it clears my mind. It helps me set my intentions for the day. It helps me really get motivated and focused to be able to do the things that I do, such as this. And so that's, for one thing, for me, I know how much it works for me. And so I can only imagine how much for people who have experienced, trauma, how much even more it can heal them as well. So in the book, once again, Lifting Heavy Things, Healing Trauma, One Rep at a Time. Is this a memoir? Is it a workbook? Is it an inspirational book? What would it be?
Yes. No, it's not quite all of those. It is. Right. So I do combine elements of memoir.
Okay.
There's also plenty of research. And then each chapter ends with a practical exercise for you to bring into your practice. And some of these are body, like movement based. Some of them are going to be a little more writing and meditation based. Some of them are very practical. The first exercise I take you through is a self-guided intake, and it's a trauma-sensitive or trauma-informed intake that looks at really your goals, your strengths, the things you don't like, your interests, your resources. And I think the resources is a big part we often forget. And I explain what those things are in great detail. A lot of people think strengths and they think things I'm good at, but strengths are also things you enjoy, right? And you can really capitalize on that when you're trying to decide what type of, because a lot of people are like, I'll try it, but I don't want to lift, heavy things, literally. So what movement does resonate with them? And I help them pick that. So some of it's really practical like that. Others are practices in connecting with different parts of your body that are really getting your attention, and just really learning how to start listening to your body, because it knows so much. There's so much information there.
Yeah. Well, even from a technical standpoint, when it comes to lifting or just exercising, sometimes I see many people at the gym and I'm like, oh, because they're just uninformed. Uninformed. Right. Well, I say that as a hypocrite, because today I was doing something and I slightly twinged my back and I was like, oh, James, here you were looking at someone else's form and karma came along and you twinged your back. So that's on me. But the point is that it's so important to have that technique, because the more technique you have, when you do something intentional, the more you're not only present in what you're doing, but you also see the results as well. Because when I know the position of my body, I know the way my body's aligned. Not only does it align your body, but it aligns your spirit, it aligns your emotionality. So there's a lot of parallel process there. So what the body can be analogous, or like an analogy, about how we feel. So the alignment of that recenters yourself and realigns how you feel as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And also, kind of what you touched on, and this is something I tell people who are more like very interested in the gym and have no interest as soon as they start to hear things like mindfulness or whatever, they kind of like, I don't know, it makes you a better lifter. Like that's when I have coached barbell. I've coached, big powerlifting and that sort of thing. And the fact is that a really good coach uses the same kind of cues that I use as a trauma-informed personal trainer to to feel your body, to not use the mirror, to feel your body and feel what your body's doing, not what the bar is doing. Like that is what good coaching is. So you're going to, maximize your gains, bro.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a win-win. That's hysterical. That is so funny. Can you give us some examples of, so someone has experienced trauma, so they're doing this. How would, let's say, your support system, so let's say I'm working out with a friend and I don't know they've experienced trauma, but all of a sudden I see that they're perhaps demonstrating something. How would I, as a support person, and I'll ask it the inverse as well, how would I as a support person help that person who is perhaps struggling with something while they're working out?
Sure. The first thing to do is encourage them to pause. And this is actually something that's throughout my book, even in the writing of the book, because I feel like a lot of books about trauma can be so overwhelming when you're sitting there reading it. I often remind my reader, I invite them to take a moment to pause and ground, because it's a lot of information. And when you're training and you're starting to get overwhelmed, your nervous system is taking in a lot of information and getting overwhelmed, right? So it's the same thing. So just pause. And, for some people, you can be very straightforward and say, pause and say, hey, is everything okay? and then, suggest that they really look around the space, orienting to the space. And the other thing you can do is if it's somebody who maybe, be like, you can redirect. It's like, oh, yeah, ask a question about the form, start a conversation to also have that pause and maybe a check-in in that way. It's, that's how you feel more comfortable encouraging somebody to check in with themselves.
And yeah, exactly. And I'm assuming you also talk about the importance of breath and breathing.
I do talk about breath and breathing, especially there's a chapter all about the importance of recovery and how rest and recovery, and that some of that can be like steady state cardio is actually very helpful. That's a very practical thing you can use. I don't focus a ton on the breath because there's so much out there. And actually one thing I found, this is actually how I got my first clients, is I wrote a whole article, why taking a deep breath, why telling somebody to take a deep breath can be terrible advice or something like that. And because for some people, when they start to notice their breath, it can be triggering as well, similar to the stillness of yoga. If you notice all that constriction. So like if you're like lifting and you're tense and you're starting to get very overwhelmed and then you check in and you notice there's really no space to breathe, that can also be anxiety producing. So I tend to encourage people to use tools like looking around and identifying 5 things of a certain color, looking at 360 to really ground. So you start with maybe, you don't have to do, I usually do like blue, yellow, red, your primary colors. You can pick whatever colors you want. You can orient with sound, but the idea is to build a map of where you are in space, 360 degrees, using a different sense. You can also pat yourself down, to feel your skin. I tend not to ground using the breath so much with people.
And I actually like it, and I appreciate you teaching me it because I put it together in my mind as well as you were talking. Because I think someone who's experienced trauma, certain types of trauma, the breath itself, that sound or that feeling can be a trigger. And so I appreciate you saying that. Thank you for teaching me that as well, because I can see someone who would have trauma, how that breathing would actually cause more of a hindrance as it would to calming them down. So thank you for sharing that with me.
Of course.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say real quick, one thing though, is if you know somebody does have access to like nose breathing, this is something we use a lot in my family, is remind each other to breathe through the nose, in and out, because that allows the diaphragm to move easier than if you're breathing through your mouth, which uses your chest muscles more. And this will help bring the nervous system down. So, but if you've got a stuffy nose, like it's allergy season up here, I said to my daughter right now, who has terrible seasonal allergies, breathe through your nose. She's 13, so she'd give me quite the look.
That's hysterical. And I also heard, I can't remember which one it is. It's either left or right nostril, that if you breathe through, it actually slows down your heart rate even more. So it's someone will have to look at it. I don't remember which one it was, but that's to add on to what you were saying. But that's wonderful. I like that. I think that's very good. I love the practicality, and not to minimize, but it's brilliant to really use your 5 senses to ground, because what we teach in psychology is if you're struggling too much in your head, you have to get out. So that's why your senses are so important. And so when you have that, then you're aware of your surroundings and you're focusing on that. You're mindfully looking at, I'm looking at this, I'm looking at that, I'm hearing this, I'm hearing that, and I can feel that. So that really gets someone out of their head. And then conversely, if you're in a space where there's too much senses, you go inward and you use your self-talk. Your self-talk guides you to calm yourself down as well. So it just really depends on what the person needs at that moment. But I love the fact that you teach them to go outward, and also they can go inward as needed as well.
Yep. Yes. I also, I do talk about a way to come inward using the senses too, specifically with hearing, which is listening to sounds first further away outside, and then moving your way into hearing your own sounds. You can use it the reverse. I like that one. That's actually the one I tend to use the most for me. Either expanding out, starting with my own sounds, expanding out, or starting with, if I need to come into myself, starting with outside sounds and coming back in. You
are brilliant. You are my new best friend. I love this. I've never thought of it that way. That's great. That always reminds me of a form of Qigong, which is a type of sensory aspects of that as well. So I'm actually going to use that. I love that spatial aspect of it to use that. So thank you. Wow. I've learned so much today. I really have. That's great. Now your book, it recently just came out. Congratulations. What's on the horizon for you?
So I'm doing some book events, which is exciting. And actually the book launch in this virtual world is going to be online. It's on June 10th, and it's going to be a mini self-care retreat. We're going to do it with the Astoria Bookshop, my friends over there. And there'll be some reading, a conversation with the folks at Narrative Healing and Lisa Weiner. And also I'm going to be taking people through that self-guided intake as well.
Good.
And I'm doing a few more events around the book. And, I am always happy to come and speak with organizations, and I'm just looking to keep spreading the word. It's really exciting. I mean, I started doing it because I wanted to tell people about it. And it's like, I'll just bang my pots and pans and someone will listen.
I love it. Well, this show will syndicate for multiple times in the future. So if people hear this, and of course they missed that event, then you can simply go to her website. So Laura Khoudari, thank you so much for being a wonderful guest on my show today. If the listeners want to find out more information about you, to find out everything you're doing, and to purchase your book, Lifting Heavy Things, Healing Trauma One Rep at a Time, where would they find this information online?
You can find it on my website, which is laurakhoudari.com. And my book is available from your preferred bookseller in the United States and Canada, and also other places around the world that sell English language books.
Wonderful. My listeners also know that if they can't find this information any other place, simply go to the show notes at jamesmillerlifeology.com, and I will link you with Laura. Thank you so much for being a wonderful guest on my show today. I learned so much from you, so thank you.
It was a pleasure. It was really nice to meet you, James.